How can they make The Prisoner of Azkaban into a good season of TV? I have broken down exactly how I would create a TV show from The Philosopher's Stone, then I did another video breaking down how I'd make a TV show from The Chamber of Secrets, and you folks seem to like them. So today I'm going to be breaking down exactly how I would structure The Prisoner of Azkaban as a season from the new Harry Potter TV show. But before we get into that, there is a couple of things I need to mention based on the comments I've had on the last couple of videos. First of all, I have been quite outspoken about the fact that I don't think the Harry Potter TV show is my favourite idea. Like, the movies still hold up really well. There's plenty of other new stories I would prefer to see being told as opposed to just retelling this one. And like, I really don't know how they make this TV show different enough from the movies to feel worth doing as a project, while not making it feel so different that it's just like jarring and alienating. But more than any of that, my main issue has always been that the main selling point when this show was announced was that it will allow more time for them to tell a more book-accurate version of the story. And particularly with the first three, I thought the movies they made were actually pretty book-accurate. Like, sure, they missed a few things, but that's always going to happen. Some things just don't translate well to screen. But mostly, we got pretty good versions of these stories in the first three films, especially when you compare it to the longer, later books and how much we didn't get from them. And so if we are going to go from movies that were 2.5 hours long to TV shows with 8 episodes that are maybe 45 minutes to an hour long each, how are we possibly going to find enough content in these first 3 seasons to fill a well-paced season of a TV show, while at the same time still balancing pacing and making each episode good and interesting and engaging in its own right? Because we can't just have 3 consecutive episodes of regular life at Hogwarts. Like, as much as a lot of the diehards would love to just see Charms class and Defense Against the Dark Arts class with nothing huge happening, we need some plot development. And honestly, I think the diehard Harry Potter fans who say they want that, like, I feel like, sure, you might think you want that, but when you watch it, I feel like you'd be really understimulated and bored by it all. Like, it would be cool to see in the first instance, but we don't want it over and over and over again, right? And besides the diehard fans, HBO needs the mass market to watch this show. They're going to want kids to watch it and love it and buy all the tie-in merch and the toys. And then they're going to want teenagers and young adults who love superhero movies to find it stimulating and fun and engaging. And then they still need to capture a big audience, including, but not limited to, the diehard Harry Potter fans. So that's where this series of videos comes in. I'm trying to figure out exactly how to make a show that is true to the books, but still well-paced, still interesting, still gives us good plot points and plot progression in each episode, gives each of the main characters their own moments to shine and grow each season. And unfortunately, we can't just do that if the show is 1 episode for every chapter or 2. And whenever I mention the pacing, particularly in these earlier seasons, a common comment that I get is that maybe the earlier seasons should just be fewer episodes, like 5 or 6 until season 4 or something. And sure, that could well be the case. They might do that. But remember, in these videos, I am trying to justify a decision that I don't fully agree with. Like, I'm acting as though I'm the showrunner for a TV show that I wouldn't have greenlit myself. And based on that, my prerequisite is that we should at least get as much content as we got from the Percy Jackson series for it to be worth rebooting this. Considering the big selling point was that we want a TV show, so we have more time to tell a more comprehensive story truer to the books, we need a yardstick for more time. And they actually gave a similar reason for splitting the Deathly Hallows books into 2 parts. They said the story was so rich from the Deathly Hallows books that they needed to split it into 2 parts to tell it properly. So with that in mind, the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2 films combined make a runtime of around about 4.5 hours. And I know all of the books are different in length, and so they can dynamically change each season, and even within each season they can change episode lengths to suit, because that's the beauty of the streaming model. It just wouldn't sit right with me to have a TV season tell a book story in less time than the films told the Deathly Hallows story. And I'm afraid 6 episodes at around 40 minutes each still comes out to only 4 hours long, which is shorter than the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2 combined. So I have decided, in my godly wisdom, that we need more time than that to justify this reboot, which is being sold as necessary because they need to take time to tell a more in-depth and book-accurate version of the story. I know the logic isn't flawless, but in a world full of chaos and uncertainty, I need some sort of rule to benchmark this project, okay? So we're going forward assuming the minimum runtime for these seasons will be 8 episodes of around about 40 minutes to an hour. The later seasons can have more episodes, longer episodes, be split into multiple seasons, that's fine, but this is the minimum. And with that said, let's jump into exactly how I would structure The Prisoner of Azkaban as a season of TV. Fair warning, everything I've just said about a season of well-paced TV kind of goes out the window, because this doesn't really lend itself well to the format of TV. And I say that with a heavy heart because it is my favourite of the movies. So episode 1. As most seasons of this show will, this season will begin with Harry at the Dursleys. Now, in the books, we see Sirius Black on the Muggle news as though he's a Muggle criminal, and Uncle Vernon comments on his messy hair. That's how we can tell he's a reprobate. And that actually happens on the Muggle news not long after Harry has read in the Daily Prophet about the Weasleys winning the lottery. And I'd actually love to combine those two moments. Like, I'd love it if Harry read the Prophet article about the Weasleys winning the lottery, and then he glances up from the Daily Prophet to see the Muggle news about Sirius Black being an escaped and dangerous convict. Now, I'm not sure how Vernon would feel about Harry reading his wizarding newspaper in their living room, but I think it's a fun bit of foreshadowing, considering the very news article about the Weasleys is the reason Sirius knew Peter was alive and decided to escape from Azkaban. Now, episode 1 obviously needs to establish how cruel and awful Aunt Marge is, resulting in Harry rage-inflating her with magic. And after that, we need him to get a glimpse of the Grim, which is actually Sirius, while he waits for the night bus. And then the whole journey with Stan and Ernie, in which Harry learns even more about Sirius and how dangerous he is and the crimes he supposedly committed. Now, depending how much of a slow burn the episode decides to do things with the Dursleys and Aunt Marge at the beginning, that could be the end of the episode when Harry gets to London and meets the Minister for Magic. But I think realistically, this can still be done well and still get enough time to see Harry hanging around Diagon Alley, staring at the firebolt every day, hanging out with Florian Fortescue, having interactions in Flourish and Blots with the staff who hate the Monster Book of Monsters. And then the episode can end with Hermione and the Weasleys meeting up with them, Hermione getting Crookshanks, and they have their first altercation between Crookshanks and Peter as Scabbers. Some good foreshadowing to put that in episode 1. And then there's this great line in the book where Harry tells a magic mirror that he's not going to get murdered. And the mirror is just like, yeah, sure, if you say so. Like, blows it off. And I kind of think it's a fun note to end the episode on. Like, leaves the viewer thinking, is Harry gonna get murdered? It's a fun first episode. Maybe it's a little crammed in, but we have some drama with Aunt Marge and Harry thinking he's gonna be expelled for using magic out of school. And then we have the magic on display from Diagon Alley, some foreboding and foreshadowing with Sirius and Crookshanks and Scabbers. It's an okay season opener. I feel like every video of these that I've done, I have not liked my first episode. But it does finish at a good point to lead us into a really exciting second episode. So episode 2 is going to start with the characters heading to platform 9 3/4, which quickly moves into us meeting Lupin for the first time on the train. And early in the episode, we will get our first glimpse at the Dementors and all the drama that ensues with Harry experiencing his mother screaming. Now, I know in the books he just hears it, but I actually would like this to become visual flashes of that moment. Like, whenever Harry has these run-ins with Dementors, I would really like quick and unnerving flashes of the night Voldemort murdered Lily and James for us as viewers to experience with Harry. Like, I'm talking Aronofsky-style sequences, right? Harsh, grating string music, jarring editing. I want it to feel as uncomfortable for us to watch as a viewer as it is for Harry to experience. And that's going to lead us perfectly into the beginning of life at Hogwarts this year and our first lessons of the year, including meeting Trelawney, who's going to tell Harry about his impending doom. I also want her other predictions too, though. I want her to say to Neville that he's going to smash a cup and she wants him to pick a blue one rather than a pink one. I think there's a fan theory going around where every prediction Trelawney makes in the books actually kind of comes true at some point. I've never verified it myself, but if that is the case, I would like to see her making more flippant, seemingly ridiculous predictions that eventually come true. We'll also get slight hints at this point of everything that's going on with Hermione and the Time Turner. I actually think the film did this really, really well with having her, like, not in a shot, and then it cuts away, and when it cuts back, she sat there as though she was there the whole time. We're also going to have Hagrid's first Care of Magical Creatures lessons, including Harry riding Buckbeak, but hopefully in a less cheesy way than they did in the film, and eventually Malfoy getting his very deserved injury. Now, in the books, this block of lessons then includes Potions class, in which Malfoy's injury means Snape makes Harry do every little task for him, which I would like to see. And then there's also Defense Against the Dark Arts class, where Lupin introduces the class to a boggart, which also really needs to take place in this season. Like, the movie scene with the boggart was fantastic. I want them to do it really well in the series as well. However, I don't think an episode which is just lesson, 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 lesson is particularly interesting. There's not enough variance in what's occurring. Plus, I think the Dementor attack at the start of the episode and then a Dementor as a boggart at the end of the episode is a little bit repetitive. Like, we want the Dementors to keep their oomph, and I think they lose it if they're in it too much. I can't remember which author it was, or maybe it was a filmmaker, but someone who is better qualified for anything than I am once said that a villain or a monster is scarier up until the point when you see them, because the idea you concoct in your head is scarier than the thing actualized on screen or in writing. So I kind of want the Dementors to be in this sparingly. But anyway, not wanting potions or Defense Against the Dark Arts yet means we maybe need to rearrange things, and I thought maybe we could have the Hogsmeade visit that Harry can't go on coming at the end of episode 2, and then the episode could end with the fat lady running away because Sirius Black broke into the castle, because that's a great cliffhanger, right? But we can't have Hogsmeade until after Defense Against the Dark Arts, because Harry doesn't go to Hogsmeade and spends that time with Lupin, but Harry and Lupin's relationship and conversations wouldn't really make sense until after that lesson. This book is really hard to break down into good, well-paced episodes, I'm telling you. So look, I think we're going to have divination, like we said, and then like regular school stuff, some feasts, Quidditch practice, bring Hogwarts to life a little bit. Because also, about Quidditch, this is the year that Gryffindor wins the cup, and so we need to build that up to be a really big deal. Maybe we have some scenes of people talking about Sirius Black and really build the tension around him being on the loose. We can have some scenes between Crookshanks and Scabbers to really set that dynamic up. And the episode can kind of end with Draco's injury in Care of Magical Creatures. Like, it's not a great cliffhanger, and it feels like a really weak episode, but I don't think we have another choice in terms of pacing. So anyway, I've kind of spoiled episode 3 for you, right? After Draco's injury, we need that potions class where Snape makes Harry do everything for Malfoy. We also need to make sure that the TV series shows everyone how truly awful Snape is. This is the class where Snape, instead of teaching Neville and helping him correct his mistakes like a teacher, he threatens to poison his toad instead. We need those microaggressions from this teacher, because that eliminates the whole argument that, oh, Snape was only awful to Harry because he reminded him of James, who bullied him. Neville's dad never bullied Snape. Why is he awful to Neville? We also get a scene in the book where Seamus tells Harry that some muggles have spotted Sirius Black not far from Hogwarts, which is a great instance of in-episode foreshadowing for what will happen to the fat lady at the end of this episode. And after that, we can go to Lupin's Defense Against the Dark Arts class and have what I hope will be a really great boggart scene. Because honestly, the one in the movie is chef's kiss, spectacular. And that leads us to Harry asking McGonagall if he can go to Hogsmeade, because he doesn't have his permission slip signed, and McGonagall is like, absolutely the hell not, there's a serial killer on the loose. And so then Harry is left alone in the castle when Ron and Hermione go, and I actually wouldn't mind inventing a scene here where Harry visits Hagrid. Like, I always thought it made sense for Harry, if Ron and Hermione aren't there, to go and see Hagrid, because they're friends, right? So a scene where Harry goes down, sees Hagrid briefly, and Hagrid can maybe mention that the first steps are unfolding after Draco was injured by Buckbeak, setting the foundations for what will eventually turn into an execution of a hippogriff. After that, Harry goes back up to the castle, and then, when he goes to Lupin's office and Lupin drinks a potion from Snape, we start to see the werewolf plot foreshadowed a little bit. And of course, we need to see Lupin drinking that potion because next time we see Defense Against the Dark Arts class, Lupin is poorly and Snape has taken over. And that gives us the whole Snape really wants the Defense Against the Dark Arts job plotline unfolding. So then after Hermione and Ron come back, we can have them talk to Harry about Hogsmeade and him get some FOMO before the drama with the fat lady and Sirius Black plays out. Again, folks, I'm not loving it, to be honest. Like, I love the Prisoner of Azkaban film, but this season just kind of, it's feeling like we're forcing our characters from plot point to plot point without any substance in the journey. And if you watched my previous videos where I try and turn the Harry Potter books into season breakdowns, you'll know I hate that style of progressing story. But I think the problem is, we've had 2 seasons now, just seeing characters in class, interacting among themselves, Snape being mean, the Dursleys being mean, Hagrid being a lovable idiot, Malfoy being a bully, and having those filler scenes start to feel a bit repetitive. Like in the first couple of seasons, you really get that, wow, magical, swept up in how beautiful Hogwarts Castle is and kids doing magic. But now it's kind of like, yeah, we've seen that plenty, thank you. On to the next bit, please. And yet none of the big story beats happen early in this book, and the foundations that are being laid for those big story beats aren't really that deep. with substance or emotional charge. Like, at least in the previous books, like, we have Harry learning to fly, for example, but the deeper meaning is that Harry finally feels like he belongs here. Like, before he was feeling like an outcast, maybe they made a mistake, maybe he'll never be a good wizard, and then he flies and he's good at it and he starts to feel like he belongs there. And in the Chamber of Secrets, we have Malfoy being a bully, but he's not just being a bully, he calls Hermione a mudblood, and there's way more emotional charge to that moment. This season so far, it's feeling a bit vapid. Either way, hopefully that will change as the season progresses, so let's move on to episode 4. So in this episode, we have got the fallout of the fat lady going missing or running away, and that gives us the opportunity to have lots of fun moments with Sir Cadogan, and some funny moments with Percy asserting his authority as a prefect. And so those funny moments juxtaposed with Sirius Black and the tension of him getting into the castle, this season can finally build some momentum in upping the ante. And that can be mirrored with Snape and Lupin when they go to Defense Against the Dark Arts class and Lupin's not there, just after Harry saw him drink a concoction that Snape brought to him. And of course we will get the infamous turn to page 394 scene. And that leads us into the Quidditch match with Hufflepuff. During an absolutely ridiculous storm, they can have Harry, who wasn't allowed to go to Hogsmeade because he didn't have a permission slip, remember, compete in a sport where he flies hundreds of feet in the air in what is basically a tornado. Hogwarts logic. During that game, Harry sees the Grim, and then 100 Dementors storm the pitch. And again, we can have flashes of Harry's mother being murdered by Voldemort as Harry experiences the Dementors in the air and then slowly soars to the ground. Although I suppose falling from that height, it probably wouldn't be slowly, would it? And then he wakes up in the hospital wing and we get the reveal that not only did Harry almost die and they lost the Quidditch match, but also his Nimbus landed by the Whomping Willow and was turned into fire kindling. So the second half of the episode can be the approach to Christmas, which includes Fred and George giving Harry the Marauder's map and him sneaking off to Hogsmeade. And the episode can close out with Harry, in his invisibility cloak, overhearing the conversation in the Three Broomsticks about his parents, Sirius Black, Wormtail, and the Secret Keeper and Betrayal story. And I think this needs to be a flashback to really do it justice. Like, I don't think we can just see the teachers talking about it in the pub. Now, I know a lot of people want full flashback episodes on the Marauders, and I can see why, right? I think it could be an interesting choice to have Harry hear a tiny piece of information at the end of an episode, and then the entire following episode is a flashback of the Marauders and how it all happened. But I just don't think we should give away too much of the Marauders story too early, and in what we need Harry to learn. I don't think there's enough substance to that part of the story to warrant a full flashback episode here. So for me, 15-20 minutes is plenty of time to tell the section of their story that needs to be told when Harry overhears this story. So episode 5 starts in a very bitty way. There's like lots of little scenes we need again to just advance the plot. So it needs to open with Harry's reaction, his anger, him hinting that he would be prepared to seek down and kill Sirius Black, much to Ron and Hermione's dismay. That evolves into the trio going to see Hagrid and finding out that Buckbeak might face execution and Hagrid has to prepare a defense for him. And then the trio, being apparently this grown man's only friends, try to do some research to help build a defense for Buckbeak. And then we're going to need the scene where Harry receives the firebolt. And do you see what I mean by just needing loads of small advancements in the plot? Like, they're necessary for things to move on, but they lack substance for the characters to really develop or show any growth in these things happening. That said, one thing that does cause conflict is the firebolt, because Hermione believes it might have been sent by Sirius Black as a trap, and Harry and Ron think that's ridiculous, and they argue about it a bunch until Hermione just dobs them into McGonagall like an absolute snitch, and not the kind you want to catch. I think that bickering about the firebolt doesn't need to all happen in one go. Like, maybe it's sprinkled throughout the first half of the episode before McGonagall eventually confiscates the broom. Meanwhile, Harry can have his private lessons with Lupin to start to learn the Patronus charm, which gives us the moment where Harry finally hears from Lupin that he and James were friends in school. And not a lot else happens until Harry gets the broom back from McGonagall, so maybe she does actually need to confiscate it earlier in the episode. Either way, Harry gets the broom back from McGonagall and she gives him the all clear. We also need the scene where we think that maybe Crookshanks has finally murdered Scabbers. And then we go into the scene with the Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw Quidditch match, which, among all the doom and gloom, hopefully gives us a scene where Harry is having some fun. And this also gives us an introduction to Cho Chang, the Ravenclaw Seeker, and Harry's future love interest. I think it's important that we get an introduction to her here. Like maybe she says hi to Harry and he like blushes and stumbles over his words and the Weasley twins make fun of him for it. It makes more sense than just like introducing her as the object of Harry's affections in the Goblet of Fire, because it sort of goes from 0 to 100 very quickly when that's the case. But getting a soft intro to her in this episode, having it be lighthearted, fun, a Quidditch scene where Harry's on the firebolt and it's incredible. It's some nice positivity, which of course the end of the episode will then pull away when Ron reveals that he was attacked in the middle of the night by none other than Sirius Black. So episode 6 will pick up in the aftermath of Ron being attacked, but he and Hermione aren't talking, of course. So we'll get the scene where Hagrid tells Harry and Ron that his court case for Buckbeak went badly, another trip to Hogsmeade in which Harry's floating head attacks Malfoy, and then when he comes back, we get an interesting interaction between Harry and Snape, which reveals how much Snape hated James. This scene really needs Snape to hammer home how much Harry looks like James, so that the ending of the season, when Harry thinks he sees his dad cast a Patronus, but actually it's himself, so that that bit makes sense. And of course we need the very famous line, "My dad didn't strut." Maybe hearing about the Snape-James rivalry will lend itself to another flashback like we had earlier in the series, this time showing some of the interactions between Snape and James playing pranks and one bullying the other. We also have Snape trying to figure out the Marauders map, but merely being insulted by it, which I love as a scene. Especially because then Lupin comes and interrupts them and takes the map himself with a peculiar look. And then he has a rather enigmatic conversation with Harry about the map makers. And this is something the movie missed out completely. They never really set the foundations for who the Marauders were, and the reveal that it was Pettigrew, Lupin, Sirius, and James. So the show needs to lay those foundations, and it needs to start here, if not sooner. So a large part of this episode is going to be setting up for the final 2 episodes, including the Snape and Lupin interaction we just had. But with that said, and all of that set up, we need to get on to the final Quidditch match of the season. Harry on his firebolt, defeating Slytherin, helping Gryffindor win the Quidditch Cup, finally, in Oliver Wood's last year at Hogwarts. Wood can even mention that he's been offered a pro contract to play Quidditch for a living, and I'd be half tempted to end the episode there on a high, but I think we need a cliffhanger. So throughout this episode it will be clear we are in exam season, the year is coming to an end at Hogwarts, people are studying hard. Among that studying, Hermione and Ron kind of make up when we learn that Buckbeak has been officially sentenced to death. Malfoy, of course, will be smarmy about it, so Hermione will punch him in the mouth, and the internet will continue to meme that moment over and over. It will be excellent. And then after the Quidditch victory and the highs of that, Harry's going to go for his final exam, his divination exam, where Trelawney delivers a prophecy to him, mentioning the Dark Lord being reunited with the servant after 12 years. And that's where the episode ends, and we go into what maybe would be a great double bill of a finale. So the penultimate episode will start on the night of Buckbeak's execution. The trio will head down to comfort Hagrid, and there they'll find a surprisingly alive Scabbers. After some comforting, the executioner arrives with the minister, the trio have to leave, and from a distance, they hear the execution of Buckbeak and Hagrid's distressed screams. And as Ron goes to comfort Hermione because she gets upset, Scabbers darts out of his hand. And Ron is then tackled by a giant black dog, and Harry and Hermione chase him, and the dog drags Ron and his broken leg away under the Whomping Willow into the Shrieking Shack. And I know this episode started with a couple of other scenes in other places, so it's not technically going to be a bottle episode, but I love the idea of a beautifully acted, almost bottle episode in the Shrieking Shack, as Sirius reveals himself, and Lupin comes along and they explain everything, and then Snape shows up, and it's all the emotional decisions for Harry on who to believe, and then Pettigrew is revealed from Scabbers and everything unravels. And I think with the right actors, and the right writers, and a good composer, and a beautiful score, and a great director, this could be a brilliant, dark, gritty piece of drama. No frills, no gimmicks, just career-defining performances from fabulous actors. And amongst all of that, there will be the reveal that Crookshanks helped Sirius all year, the reveal about the Marauders being animagus, Lupin being a werewolf, so much substance for an incredible scene. And we really need them. We need them to make a huge deal out of Harry being the one to choose whether Sirius kills Peter or they spare him and turn him in. Harry makes the choice to spare him, and that's so important. If you've forgotten from the books, I will get to why in a moment. But the episode, of course, will mostly take place in the Shrieking Shack, but at the end, we know that Lupin turns into a werewolf when they step out into the moonlight, Pettigrew escapes, the Dementors overwhelm Harry and Sirius, but not before Harry thinks he's seen his father produce a stag patronus, and everything fades to black. And that's where the episode ends. So the finale, the last episode of the season, will start with Harry waking up in the hospital wing, and he will overhear Snape being promised an Order of Merlin from the Minister, and also he'll hear the Minister mention that they're going to give Sirius Black to the Dementors to perform the kiss. And then we'll have Dumbledore, Hermione, Harry and Ron in the hospital wing before the reveal that Dumbledore believes them that Sirius is innocent, and his cryptic clue to Hermione. And that reveals Hermione's secret, how she's been using the time turner all year, and then she turns it so they can play through events a second time around to try and save both Buckbeak and Sirius. So they keep their distance, Hermione explains everything to Harry and the rules of time travel, and the rules of time travel in the book aren't great, so maybe they will put some more solid rules in this show. But mostly, they will free Buckbeak. They will see events unfold with Sirius tackling Ron and eventually everyone one by one going into the Shrieking Shack. Before they all come out one by one, and then Lupin transforms and everything plays out and they watch it from a distance. That is, of course, until Lupin transforms and then runs towards the forest, which happens to be where Harry, Hermione and Buckbeak are taking cover, so they have to move to a now vacant Hagrid's hut, because Hagrid moments earlier was drunk walking up to the castle in his depressive state. And after a while, Harry emerges, knowing they'll have to save Sirius any moment now. And the Dementors swirl at Sirius and at Harry and Hermione from the past, and Harry has stood there waiting, and waiting for his dad. And the tension can build, the music can rise, we wait, and we wait for James, but he never comes. And then Harry realizes it was always him, and he steps out, and he casts the Patronus, and it's a stag, and it clears the Dementors, and then Snape shows up, and he takes Sirius up to the castle. And of course, Dumbledore told them where Sirius was going to be taken, to Flitwick's office. So Harry and Hermione, they mount Buckbeak, they fly up to Flitwick's office, and they rescue him. Now this back in time saving everybody plot kind of goes really smoothly. Like, maybe in the show they can add a little bit of conflict, a little bit more of will they, won't they succeed. But eventually they do succeed. Sirius and Buckbeak flee to freedom, and then we see things play out when Harry and Hermione return to the hospital wing. Fudge is aghast that Sirius has escaped. Snape is furious and he's blaming Harry with literally no evidence, which adds more fuel to the fire that Snape is the worst person ever, although technically he is right, it was Harry in this instance. But actually, Snape is the worst person ever, because then we'll get Harry's final scene with Lupin, where Lupin reveals that Professor Snape accidentally let slip that Lupin was a werewolf, and then they received a bunch of complaints, so Lupin had to resign. And in that scene, we absolutely need the line from Lupin, where he says, "There may come a time when you will be very glad that you saved Pettigrew's life." That's why it was so important that we got Harry making that choice earlier in the Shrieking Shack, because it's very important foreshadowing for Wormtail's death in the Deathly Hallows. And unlike when they made the films, we have all the books now. We know every single important moment, and we have to give them screen time. Anyway, then we have our typical season finale unwind, the trip back to London on the Hogwarts Express, the letter from Sirius that the firebolt was actually from him, Harry's permission slip for Hogsmeade next year, the gift of the owl to Ron. And look, the last half of the season kind of feels strong and emotionally poignant, but the start, man, I didn't like the first half of this season at all. And I'm really interested in how the actual showrunners will try and balance things when it eventually comes out. Like, maybe I've waited the back half of the season too much and they'll just speed things up in the first half and have it over fewer episodes. Making these videos has actually made me way more excited for the TV show because I just want to see how wrong I am in my planning. Anyway, we've got a long time until this season eventually comes out. In the meantime, I recently did the same thing breaking down the Chamber of Secrets into a season of TV, and you might want to watch that video next.